Good evening, friends. It's my pleasure to invite you to the first India Power Talk in association with the Indian Chamber of Commerce, one of the oldest chambers, and LawSikho, the largest online legal education platform. I welcome my friends from London, Brussels, Singapore, and US also. Friends, we are in an unprecedented global lockdown and extremely challenging situation medically, socially, and more economically. While the race for discovering vaccines may get over soon, our race to discover economic solutions to revive the global economy may continue for some time.
India has been witnessing record increase in the FDI, and we may have most of the US, European, and Japanese MNCs successfully operating in India. Still, COVID-19 could inflict a huge and permanent loss to our GDP. I'm afraid that India, despite being on the growth trajectory in the last decade, may see some severe economic damage compared to the Western world. However, friends, the silver lining is that the coronavirus has put India back on the drawing board of many multinational corporations. As rightly pointed out by Deepak Bagla, CEO of the India's Foreign Investment Facilitation Agency, that India's large domestic market makes it an attractive FDI location, as companies can build economies of scale in the local market and then leverage to export their products around the world. And also the IMF chief once said that India has worked on the fundamentals of its economy, but there are problems to be addressed. That's huge positive and equally a big responsibility on all of us to act fast and act now. Every Indian citizen needs to put his or her best foot forward, for which we need experience, insights, and wisdom. India Power Talk is an effort to create an easily accessible digital reservoir of such insights, strategies, and constructive suggestions from international leaders on how to revive Indian economy. We would be inviting entrepreneurs, economists, professors, investment bankers, scientists, lawyers, chartered accountants, and professionals having experience from diverse sectors who could contribute on the subject. With this introduction, friends, let me introduce our first truly internationally distinguished leader, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti. Sir is a chartered accountant and cost accountant, certified internal auditor, financial planner, and fraud examiner. His career spans over 4 decades of sheer hard work. Currently chairman of Shailesh Haribhakti and Associates, Chartered Accountant and Accountants. He is also non-executive chairman and on board of many top listed Indian companies, including L&T Finance and others. He is actively involved in digital board governance along with Sri G.N. Bajpai, ex-chairman SEBI, wherein he has helped to create program for digital governance and compliance support to global corporations globally. Mr. Haribhakti actively promotes shared value creation and green environment through his own enterprise Planet People and Profit Consulting Private Limited, and his leadership roles as chairman of CSR committees on some of the boards that he serves on. His earlier prominent assignments includes chairman of NPS Trust constituted under the Pension Regulatory Fund and Development Authority, chairman Western India Regional Council, chairman of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in India. He has also served as the president of Indian Merchants Chamber, Institute of Internal Auditors Bombay Chapter, Bombay Management Association BMA, and he was also a member of SEBI, Committee on Disclosures and Accounting Standards, and member of Takeover Panel and member of Accounting Standards Board, IASB, Standards Advisory Council. Mr. Haribhakti has a passion for teaching, writing, and public speaking. He was associated with the Indian Institute of Management IIMA as visiting faculty. He frequently contributes his views on public forums to the press and to the electronic media. He is also active on social media like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. A truly international leader. The format is very simple. Shailesh Bhai will speak his mind first, and only if required, I may just ask him few things to clarify. And lastly, we'll take Q&A. With this introduction, may I invite Shailesh Bhai to first officially launch the India Power Talk and then commence his opening remark and further his mind, strategies, and guidance to the audience.
Let me begin with our traditional Indian greeting, Namaste. The whole world has now recognized this as a symbol of true hygiene and proper social distancing. In a COVID and a post-COVID world, these are very important issues that we will need to continue to keep in mind. Let me say how happy I am to be part of this first India Power Talk, organized with such gusto and with such elan by my dear friend, Mr. Nitin Poddar. And I'm equally thankful to the ICC for having joined hands to make this event possible. I have great pleasure in saying that it's a deep honor for me to be the first speaker at this Indian Power Talks. The subject Nitin Bhai has given me is reviving India and India's growth story. For this, let me first provide a bit of a context. We were chugging along at a growth rate of a little above 5%. And we were seeing a little bit of hesitancy in that growth rate. The way our GDP is structured is fairly unique in the world. We had a very large chunk coming from services, something in the region of 55%. We had around 22% coming from manufacturing, and the balance 18% coming from agriculture. What COVID has done is it has made the service engine sputter in a large portion of that service GDP. It has brought manufacturing to a temporary halt, so to speak, as a result of the lockdown. But agriculture is still kicking, is still in great shape. And I'm going to talk about the revival of the India growth story by identifying the sectors which will actually drive this growth. And I will put before all of you my proposals of how this growth can actually be engendered. So let me walk you through what constitutes 75% of our population in terms of engagement and 75% of our GDP by value. And it is amazing to find that only 5 sectors make up this overwhelming proportion of our GDP and of our population. And which are these 5 segments? The first and most important is digital businesses. It's part of the service portion of India's economy, which is still sort of kicking, which is still not yet comatose as manufacturing has become. This constitutes maybe 7 to 10% of our overall GDP. Agriculture is the second one I will talk about, which constitutes between 15 and 18% of our GDP. Then we have the micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are a very large component of our GDP, both in terms of engagement of people and in terms of the value that we generate from it. Then we have mobility and construction, which are, again, very significant component. And finally, but not trivially, actually very important, is retail businesses. This is the 5-point program or the emphasis which will get India's growth revived and which will start putting India back on the trail of world leadership in both growth and in innovation. And that is going to be the rest of my presentation this evening. So let's talk about digital businesses. It is small wonder that in all this story of stock markets collapsing, oil prices collapsing, commodity prices collapsing, the one index which has now turned positive is the Nasdaq, which this morning delivered a 0.8% growth in 2020. And what has led to this? It is the amazing performance of the digital businesses of the world. Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, Netflix, Google, all of them have performed brilliantly. And so also has the one big collaboration software enterprise, Zoom, which has brought us together today. In addition, every digital company which was able to function without the touch point of a human intervention has continued to grow and continue to grow brilliantly. The performance of this part of the global economy has been absolutely remarkable. Just give you 2 or 3 exceptional data points. The meeting software of Microsoft was being hesitantly adopted by a particular firm. Over the last 6 months, they had been able to get only about 45 to 50 people onto that meeting software. Within 3 days, 4.5 lakh individuals from across the world jumped onto that particular software, making it one of the most rapid adaptations that the world has seen. Satya Nadella, in his earnings call just last week, talked about the fact that the digitalization that happened or could happen in 2 years has happened in 2 months. That is the rapid pace, the compression that has happened in terms of human need to actually move over to digital properties and digital platforms. This is a absolutely once in a lifetime kind of transition. And it's a very rapid transition that we are seeing. So what are the various businesses and activities that this process of digitization is likely to touch? Obvious examples, desperately required today, are education. I mean, most of our young children are learning from home. A lot of the university graduates who have had to go back home are learning off the internet. E-learning will become a very substantial portion of all our learning, all our training, all our processes to keep ahead or keep at least in pace with the time. Second most obvious thing is telehealth. It is impossible in terms of the doctor-patient ratios that the world has, and particularly India has, to manage the pandemic that we are all suffering from without telehealth. Some countries have been exceptional in bringing on everything that there is to do on the platform of telehealth. Take Israel, for example. The entire treatment of a patient is being done completely off the internet. They have been able to touch every home, move into every condition, measure it, examine it, prescribe the kind of medication, prescribe the getting onto a ventilator, the getting off a ventilator, the taking of tests, all of that purely on a non-human touch platform. And that has led to the immense success in managing this pandemic. Now, this experience is going to get replicated across many treatments in many parts of the world. Government services are also likely to be delivered at home, which will be an absolutely new paradigm, which becomes possible and perhaps necessary because of the experience that we have had when a large proportion of our population has to be locked down at home. Embedded chip-driven services. Now, this is something that is going to become a standard. Take a smart passport. If you have an IoT chip embedded in it, then it would automatically record all your movements in and out of a country. So no need to keep track of it, no need to examine passports for any particular purpose. The granting of visas through the VFS can be perhaps connected with that and with the identity database. And you could have a purely digital service for visa granting, for control over movement across borders, and all of that. Now think about how this can be extended to the manufacturing world. And it is not difficult to imagine VR, that is virtual reality and augmented reality driven education, which research has found has got at least a 25% enhanced efficacy than traditional means of education. So the gains that are to be made from a VR-driven education are phenomenal. VR, AR-led design, which is now called by the name of generative design, which enables you to collaboratively talk about the outcomes that you desire and put into place design formats, which will then drive production. Health, as I've already mentioned. Factory operations. Imagine that the factories of tomorrow, which will have a large number of robotic and semi-robotic processes, which can be driven from a remote location because the entire way in which the entire flow of activity is happening can be tracked and processed through a VR mechanism from a remote location. We've all been into a 100% automated warehouse where a single human being only at the warehouse gate is able to control the entire operation because everything is controlled from one single source using a dashboard. Any item is retrieved in extremely short period of time and brought where it is required. So all sorts of activities. And let's take just for a second of focus on the amazing success that has been demonstrated in the challenge of COVID by countries such as the 3 countries which have now taken the lead and shown the world how this can be overcome. I'm talking about South Korea, talking about Hong Kong, and to a great extent, Taiwan. What they have been able to do is they have been able to multiplex contact tracing in a way that even with the masking of the privacy issue, they are able to point out the risks that are embedded in moving to particular places and are pointing out to people who are exposed or at risk the need to self-quarantine. And what that has done is, in conjunction with widespread testing and a very strong program for enhancing personal hygiene and practicing social distancing, have led to a phenomenal containment of this. Now extend that to a normal world even post-COVID, where all of the infectious diseases should actually be treated with the same respect that we are today giving to COVID-19. And if you want to achieve that, then we will need the digital health, telehealth interfaces, which will enable us to proactively deal with these conditions. And the technology for that, as we speak, is getting absolutely in place. Look at what India has demonstrated and the world is now getting ready for. Huge big data systems, which will drive efficient management of pensions, provident funds, taxes, services, the entire the practice of accounting, auditing, making sure that information systems work, research. Huge impact to be able to process big data, bring in the parameters, and actually deliver value. Remote correction of situations that are not working. Embedded chips are going to make the world a trillion sensor world this year, despite COVID. And what that is going to do is going to enable a remote operation, a complete tracking of what is happening on the manufacturing shop floor in terms of the interfaces between various processes, and make the digital possibilities actually come alive. E-tax, e-justice, e-registrations, all of these are going to become the grist of tomorrow's world. And all of these are situations in which Indian enterprises, which have had vast experience in this matter, take the leadership role in the world. They will move out of Indian frontiers. There will be collaboration. They will be working together. And what this will do is dramatically alter and transform India's ability to deliver these services digitally, flawlessly to the world. Let me come to agriculture. And I've got 4 big ideas that can further transform agriculture. Good news for India is that we've had a bumper crop which has been effectively harvested. And as we speak, the harvested crop is getting sorted, transported, placed into godowns, and ready for delivery for human consumption. So food security, given the fact that we already had 60 million tons of food grain stocks and the bumper crop we have, potential for a reasonable monsoon, puts us into a situation where food security is guaranteed. Now let's see what can be value added to this particular great endowment of nature. Let's fuse vertical agriculture with the traditional forms of agriculture. And we can see that you could have production of vegetables, leafy salads, and berries and other things that you can grow virtually in stand-up growth stands in your own homes and as multi-cropped in fields without soil, aeroponically, hydroponically, delivering through drip irrigation means nutrition and water to the roots and creating a productivity revolution of the kind that is just waiting to happen. This experimentation in India has started in many places. The mastery of this technology is being gained, and as we progress on this, we can have really an aspiration to join hands with the exporting nations in terms of food grains, vegetables, flowers, berries, all of that. Look at what can be delivered if land digitization happens. One of the biggest things that can be delivered if land digitization is finally accepted and put into practice, technology for it exists, a whole lot of dispute resolution in rural areas will be completed, and the bandwidth of people will be released to talk and take in the ideas that we have just been talking about. But look at one other new idea that has emerged during this lockdown. Imagine that with the food grains and with the plentiful harvest and the plentiful availability that we have, we can open up community kitchens in, let's say, 100,000 locations across the length and breadth of the country, which will provide a reasonable meal to a large number of people drawn from nearby locations. And you can see a huge need getting fulfilled. Managing water would be the other challenge. The biggest and simplest thing to do is to make sure that every irrigation project which is near completion is completed. Prioritize that as the policy imperative of every state government and of the central government. Make sure that every project which has not been completed is completed. And you can see a transformational change happening in agriculture. This year, my expectation is that the contribution to a positive growth in India, if it happens, will be largely driven by the growth that we will achieve in agriculture. And therefore, this becomes such an important sector to focus our mind and attention on. Take the MSMEs, which is the next sector I want to speak about. What needs to be done to restart the momentum? We need to group them. We need to group them by domain, group them by clusters, make sure that they can recognize that they are strong when they come together. It's not necessary to actually merge. Virtual mergers are good enough. Resources will need to be provided to this sector. And what are these resources? Access to technology, access to research, debt, and equity. It is extremely possible, very, very easy to do if the mind is made up. A contribution by the sovereign to a fund to support these resource requirements of the MSME sector. If that is seeded by, say, the government of India and the state governments in smaller measure, then we could have a conjoined large fund which is multi-sovereign, which will enable all of this to happen. And if they can do a first loss guarantee for 75% of the debt, then the kind of momentum to lend to this sector by the financial institutions can be significantly enhanced. And the entire cycle of making sure that these impaired organizations can get back on their feet can be set in motion. The resettlement of these activities, proximate to where the available labor is another opportunity which has opened up, because it is now becoming important to make sure that people can live in communities that they feel safe in and are able to work in clusters in a manner that they can live in a proper way, make sure that they have the right kind of housing and move towards their work back and forth with the ease that everybody wants. Cash flows need to be released to these MSMEs, starting from everything that is stuck up at the highest level, which could be a big business, which could be the government, has to percolate down through the entire supply chain so that the cycle of cash starts rotating. Manufacturing. at the SME level. Today, technology has made it possible to buy additive manufacturing driven machinery at affordable costs. And if we can do a proof of concept for, let's say, 1,000 locations in India, where this kind of machinery is brought in and a cluster of MSMEs is given the task of making sure that highly efficient manufacturing starts getting done using augmented manufacturing, using 3D printing. This is the time that through the fund that we talked about, if this kind of availability is actually put in place, we can see a transformational change for the long run. Not only will the demand in the domestic market be fulfilled, but also the demand for international markets. High quality, ready to use, made to order products and services can be produced using this additive manufacturing, augmented manufacturing. And because of the scale that can be achieved, Manufacturing 4.0 can build through the whole value chain from the MSMEs to the large businesses. And this can be an opportunity to make sure that the growth of India, the backbone of India, the MSMEs, can be brought back to health. 7 things need to be done to create this virtuous cycle. Make sure that the workforce is healthy. Make sure that they have cash. Make sure their costs are low. Make sure the technology is available to them. They are well organized. They're organized in the right kind of cluster. Collaborative processes are put in place using technology which is available. And making sure that the human aspect is fully taken into account in the revival of the MSMEs. Next, let me talk about mobility and construction. Again here, the opportunity exists to completely transform the way we think about mobility. Every kind of vehicle that we are today using for the purpose of achieving mobility, either of goods or of people, can be transformed, disrupted. What is required? We require the embracing and the adaptation of the movement towards alternative fuels, whether they are biofuels or methanol or ethanol or electric vehicles, battery-driven power, hydrogen power, whatever. This is now a crying need. India has the chance to become the #1 player in the automobile industry if the adaptation of this technology, which has begun in a nascent way in almost every major international and domestic manufacturing organization, if that is taken to its full limit, we can see a transformational change and a great potential for growth emerging right here. Again, there, the need for automation, robotics, machine learning, making sure that additive manufacturing concepts are put into place, all of that will be critically necessary. Design, as I mentioned earlier, could be generative design, which works through a collaborative AR/VR process. And what that would do is bring into existence at democratized price, affordable price, mobility at the doorstep of India for every place that mobility is required. Let's think about what can be done to construction. If we have to decongest the urban areas, which we already have plans to do, and we want to make sure that the appropriate kind of infrastructure happens in rural areas, then it becomes absolutely mandatory to create what are called mini smart cities across the length and breadth of the country. The plan for this already exists. It's a matter of execution. bring in the technologies again of 3D printing. 3D printed homes is something that is now demonstrated all over the world. There are at least 10 geographies in which this technology is now being put to use. In construction and in the establishment of smart cities around industrial clusters, which are supportive of the MSME that we talked about earlier. This is an idea whose time has come. This is an idea that we need to implement. Moving on finally to retail, we need to embrace the huge movement of technology. I think the big retail formats will have to think of themselves as sources, making procurement in the best possible way, demand aggregators to understand what is being demanded, establishers of the supply chain, warehousing, and again using what we described earlier as fully automated warehouses, extremely efficient with every inventory labeled, tagged, IoT driven, to make sure that the movement and the facilitation of the delivery happens in an orderly manner. Fully autonomous, vehicle driven, and drone driven delivery to the last mile. At the entire supply chain, a continuous machine learning and AI based engine which will pull out the demand impulses, pull out the requirements of customers in every location, feeding back down to the last mile hyper-localized supply points from which deliveries will and should happen. That is an idea, again, which has been implemented in two disparate ways. We had a whole range of multiple thousands of mom and pop stores. The time has now come to look at them as hyper-localized delivery points, which will enable the material required to go into every home. Forward integrate into the home and into the human being. And if you can track inventory and track the movement in what is happening in the consumption space, you can create a tailor-made, fit to deliver to a $1.3 billion and 1.3 billion people in rising population, goods and services the kind that are demanded right there, hyper-locally. What will be required to create these impulses in our country? And I would say there's a triumvirate of ideas. We need to create far more trust. We need to create simplicity, stability, safety. All of this, when combined with a purpose-driven vision to capture all of these ideas together in a collaborative way, governments working with business, business working with people, international collaborations happening at a pace that we are beginning to see is going to break out, we can see that a far more trusting, dependable world can be created. What is required is for the government to take on the tasks of infrastructure building and the task of making sure that universal basic services and universal basic income is delivered to where it is needed, and leave business to figure out how, in a proactive, collaborative way, they can deliver to our large population goods and services which are required. 7 forces will have to be unleashed. The forces of digitalization, of disruption, of patiently, but not too patiently, in a deceptive way, moving from experiment to actual delivery. Demonetize, reduce the cost dramatically of everything that has been made, dematerialize, become absolutely conservative in the input-output ratio of the material that you use to the productivity that you actually deliver. That's dematerialization. Delocalization. It should not matter where you work from. And where you work from should be hyper-localized. Both of these are concepts of hyper-localization or delocalization. And if all of this is done, then we would have a democratized ability to serve India, to serve the world, and to get out of the unfortunate strangulation that we are experiencing today in terms of zero growth, a whole lot of manufacturing closed down, services not being able to be delivered. All of that can become a thing of the past if we focus our mind and attention on these 5 sectors, the 3 glues that I talked about, and the 7 disruptive ways in which we can bring in technology to make India get onto the path of swift growth. And I dare say that if all of this can be adopted, and it can be, all it requires is a spirit of coming together, then why should we be satisfied with just 7% growth? We should aspire to get back onto the track of double-digit growth. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a future that is feasible, possible, and I invite you together to actually make it happen. Thank you very much.
Shailesh bhai, thank you very much for the such an elaborate and detailed presentation on the 5 quadrants that you mentioned for growth. This is really very interesting. Could you please also shed some light on these are the 5 quadrants? I agree, and yes, we understand those in very much from yourself. But how do we still make India the manufacturing hub which the world is talking about? And to shed some light on that, and what do you think we could be doing to attract the good manufacturing MNCs who would like to collaborate with India? I'm not talking of the large manufacturing MNCs, but also there are a lot of mid-segment SMEs in Germany, in Japan, in other parts of Europe. They all are eager to come to India. How do we really catalyst that?
So, I mean, 3 things I would say in reply to your very important question. One is we need to shift our mindset from subtractive manufacturing, which we have been practicing all these years. If you see any small manufacturing setup, you'll see lathes and you'll see CNC machines and you'll see a whole lot of clutter. You'll see material being brought in, banged, shaped, put into molds, a whole lot of inefficient inventory. All of that happened. Until 5 years ago, the idea of bringing in 3D printing machinery was just not there because it was too expensive. Today, that is the big opportunity that India has. If you can distribute manufacturing into clusters on the back of MSMEs, on the back of labor that is now available in various pockets, you can create a truly transformational new manufacturing strategy across the length and breadth of India. Connected now because we are building the infrastructure. Our infrastructure building is at a pace that was never before the same. And if you then collaborate and bring money and working capital into the whole system, collaboration will happen naturally because the lowest cost, highest quality, dependable goods would become available from such a manufacturing setup. So the world would want, but there is even, before we get to the whole world, there's a whole lot of demand to be satisfied in India, which the manufacturing sector can take up. And this is a combination of manufacturing and service, which will have to work together to make this transformation happen. I think the time is now, the chance is now We should not miss this bus.
Sure. One more point, Shailesh, I would like you to please throw some light on that. See, the Prime Minister has worked very hard, I must say, to improve the ease of doing business in the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, the Make in India concept itself, which he was driving in 2014, we never thought that, look, 2020 we will face this situation and our dream of Make in India would really, really come true now. So he has made a lot of efforts in improving the ease of doing business. I would not dare to say that, look, we have all the regulations put in place. We have a perfect regulatory system or regulatory regime to embrace the foreign investment. So I always believe and say that as a student of law and as a practitioner for pursued for foreign investment all these 25, 26 years, I always believe that it's a work in progress. And we will need to adapt, we'll need to modify, we'll need to evolve on this stuff like any other country. It is not only in India. I guess most of the countries face this, and we have also evolved a lot. Maybe at some stages we were conservative, but would you want to throw some light on, can we do something more to pursue, as yes, we are ready in terms of regulatory framework to receive the foreign investment and go to the next level?
No, Nitin, you are so passionate about it, so I'll say only 3 things. One is we need to follow the example of a chief minister who today has frozen all labor laws for 3 years. Why can we not have a freezing of all our tax laws for 5 years? Why can we not have a stable, simple, easy to implement, fully free of all touch points system of regulation? Today, we can make the entire regulatory process digital, 100% digital. Why can we not have that as one single simple mission? It will bring huge amount of FDI to India. When people feel that laws are stable, the interfaces are electronic, the governance is digital. If this is what people can begin to expect, the attraction of India because of the market, because of the inherent intelligence of the people, will be so immense. You don't need to do any special marketing. It will be natural for people to gravitate to a place which has land, which has resources, which has people, and which has good, stable systems. I don't see any reason why we can't do this. It's so easy to do it. You're so right.
Shailesh bhai, we have this India Power Talk is being organized in association with the Indian Chamber of Commerce, and also one of the oldest chamber. And we also got LawSikho, which is one of the largest online legal education system. Now, the purpose for me, first of all, both of them were kind enough to join this whole exercise. So my request to you will be, can you throw some light on the existing SME and MSME or Indian entrepreneurs as to what, just one point, sharp point which you think they should do in this current situation to really become a global player, and to the law students who are large community of law students who are also participating. And I always believe as a lawyer that, look, lawyers and even you are a chartered accountant, so we professional should not be just remain within the 4 corners of law or the regulatory regime, but we need to become the decision maker at some stage. And why not we participate also in the progress of the country? So one just sharp points for both these communities.
So because you have said only one point, I'll say only one.
No, so please add what you.
No. I want to say only one. Unlearn, relearn, re-educate yourself, and get ready for a completely new world. Use everything, every means you can to figure out how you'll do that. If you do that sincerely and in a dedicated way, you can change the world.
I see. Great. Couple of questions. I just read a couple of questions. I just sort of summed up and asked your view. Shailesh bhai, last point. Again, still, see, you are such a knowledgeable and such a experienced person. One last message and then we'll conclude.
My message is that opportunity is immense. we should not feel bogged down by this calamity that has visited us. We should use it to look to a better future, a future where we all become stewards of the environment, we all become socially responsible, and we all begin to believe in what can be delivered because governance is of an extraordinary nature. We need to bring back the trust deficit that has been lost. We need to bring back that environment where all of us want to work together, want to make sure that all of us succeed, not at the expense of somebody, but because working together, we can all create a larger pie, which we can then share in an equitable and in a harmonious way. That would be my big struggle and my big piece of work that all of us can and should do together. Thank you very much, Nitin Bhai, for this great opportunity and this great discussion.
Great, sir. I'm sure all of us will agree that it has been a spectacular evening. My sincere and humblest thanks to Shailesh Bhai for his interest, time, and patience of spending so much time in the evening. I would like to thank the Indian Chamber of Commerce and LawSikho for extending the support. And last but not least, I thank the wonderful audience and august gathering of individuals from all diverse walks of life, but with a common objective of seeking valuable insights and experience. I conclude my vote of thanks with the humble prayer to the Almighty to bless the mankind with the right spirit to fight the coronavirus and restore the world with peace and happiness. We shall announce, friends, the next India Power Talk very soon. Till then, stay happy and stay safe. Thank you very much.